Hello and welcome to Dixon Cox. We are back with the man himself, Mr. Paul Cox. I'm Nick Dixon as ever. Last week we had Will Kingston, who I thought did a very good job.
Yeah.
But now Coxie is back from his holiday, back and raring to go. Doesn't want anyone to usurp him. So he's back and he's going to show you what you've been missing. Go on.
I listened. I watched the episode with Will. It was good, and I saw Will in the at the back of the GB News studio over the weekend, and congratulated him on a good show. He did great, actually. I thought he did really well.
When you say at the back, you don't mean you called him out to the car park.
Yeah, no, deceptively a big man, actually. So I wouldn't fancy myself, and he's an Aussie as well. So they obviously all descended from criminals, so he can fight. I'm sure.
Stocky bloke, got that strength.
No, he did
got that convict strength.
Disappointingly good, actually. He's very well informed. He is just incredibly well informed, and I thought it was a good episode. So thank you, Will.
Thanks, Will. But we're back with the Cox, and you're back from holiday. We're going to talk more about your holiday because there were some incidents. We're going to talk about it on nickdixon.net on our other podcast. If you like me and Paul bantering, we do a whole extra podcast only on nickdixon.net, and it's actually very good. People love it. It's we talk about existential questions. We don't talk about politics so much, and it gets ridiculous, but it gets very interesting and personal. We're going to go in depth into your problems on that one.
Into my problem, as we do every week, by the way, joint problems. Yeah, all in all, it was a nice holiday, but there were definitely things that, one thing in particular that I'm going to discuss on Dixon Cox Go Mental later this week, which will probably not be out till next week, actually, but there will be an episode in the near future which includes some information about my trip. But other than that, Nick, it was nice to be out the country. Went to a foreign country where there was actually more Brits, interestingly, than there were here. So that was quite fun. But it was a nice. I went to Mallorca, and it was a nice part of the island, very relaxing, and I'm glad I did. All in all.
All right. Well, we'll try and get that Dixon Cox. I don't know when we're going to do that. Dixon Cox Go Mental. We'll have to do it. We'll have to figure that out. We won't figure that out live on air because that'll be really quite boring. We should do it unless we do a third podcast of behind the scenes logistics, which is half. That's like most business podcasts and stuff now, isn't it? It's like Gary V having a meeting.
Yeah, behind the Dixon Cox.
We could do that. But for now, we know this is a political one, and you hate the banter, so we're going to get on with it and get into all the topics. We've got loads of topics. We've got the Supreme Court decision, Renaud Camus banned from entering the UK, Reform smashing it in the polls, but having some questionable candidates. This horrible guy that said that the grooming gangs were a false narrative. Horrible is the most generous way of putting it. The Pope, of course, has died. But maybe we'll give our 2 cents on that. Probably quite ill-informed. Then we'll do some Pete Wokes. Be a great show. I'm feeling like shit. So is Paul. Let's crack on. So let's do this Supreme Court. You don't get that on GB News, do you? Welcome to GB News at 9. We're going to crush some woke people, talk to some people in Scunthorpe about something, and I feel like shit. Don't know why I'm parroting the channel that's my main employer. Unorthodox. So let's do the Supreme Court decision because women exist, Paul. I suspected it for a long time. They've messed with me before. I'm like, these women, I suspected they existed. Now the court has ruled they do exist. They are real. They are adults, they are humans, they are females under the Equality Act 2010 brackets, which should be scrapped. But it's there, it's real. And even Sir Keir Starmer today has admitted, he's like, well, it's the law. See, when it's the law, then it's the law, isn't it? He loves the law more than anything else. So it's just the law. So now it's the law. He can start behaving like a normal person. What do you think?
Yeah, he I wrote a tweet yesterday, actually, talking about this being a very difficult moment for Keir Starmer because, he consumes episodes of Law and Order like it's Pornhub. And, the Supreme Court is his daddy, along with someone else, allegedly. But it's proven to be, it's been 5 or 6 days since the clarification of a law. And let's not forget at any point, this is not a new law, by the way. And Keir Starmer was at pains today to say we needed the clarification. Do you know what, Keir? Many of us didn't need the clarification, but we're glad that we got it because for about a 5 to 6 year period, it was utterly mental. where we genuinely reached a point in the West where there needed to be clarification on how many sexes there were, and what made each sex identifiable. Utterly ridiculous, embarrassingly ridiculous is how I would describe that episode of human history. And I'm sure we'll look back on that. There are sensitivities around that, and I don't want to chuck that out. There are sensitivities, of course, around, and militant trans activists aside, there are people that are affected by this, but most well-meaning, well-educated trans people understand the problem it might cause other people, and the clarification, whether we like it or not, was required. Keir Starmer, though, getting back to Keir Starmer, he's a huge problem, and it's a huge problem for him. He's a huge problem because I believe ultimately he will be seen as the worst Prime Minister we've ever had. And against, a run of some of the worst Conservative PMs we've ever seen, about 3 or 4 of them in the space of a couple of years, that's some going. And this is a problem because, of course, throughout the general election, he was unable to identify what a woman was. Pathetic. And people still voted for him. And I guess you get what you vote for, and we certainly have at the moment. But grateful to the Supreme Court. Very, very pleased for all of the women that stood up and fought for single-sex spaces. I'm just sorry they had to, but congratulations to them all. Too many to name here, but we've obviously met a few of them ourselves, and there are people there that are incredibly relieved. But let's not forget, it's not over, and a lot of people have lost their careers as a result of this madness. Genuinely lost successful careers.
And speaking of being incredibly relieved, people have been relieving themselves on statues as part of the protest. There was this story in the Sunday Telegraph: trans activist deface statue of feminist hero Millicent Fawcett. And I saw some pictures from this protest. There was some women urinating from their very female penises, and there was signs saying "We'll piss where we want." It's like what a winning message. I can't see why you've had any problem with this movement. And that's been the problem. I'm sure there are lots of nice people, but the radical wing of this movement has been horrific. So, and they had this synchronized P. They were talking about hashtag P for me. You're like, really? Is this the way, guys? It's like, it couldn't be more primarily territorial, could it? I'm just going to piss on this statue like a dog. I mean, it couldn't be more obscene, but that wasn't very good. Go on,
It
Paul.
couldn't be more masculine either.
Yeah.
It's definitely the sort of things that a group of misguided men would think was a good idea. And that's exactly what's happened here. I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to get out our female penises and desecrate a feminist statue, or just desecrate I mean, if you and I decided that to make a point about whatever it might be, that we were just going to take a slash in public, we'd rightly be heavily criticised for that. We'd likely be arrested or so. And some of the placards, the best turf is a dead turf, for example. That is borderline a death threat. Now, again, if you and I were stood up with the best whatever you want to put in there is a dead one, not only would we be arrested, we'd be, if we were stupid enough to plead guilty to it, it'd probably be looking down the barrel of 18 months in prison. And we've already discussed here and elsewhere that you and I would not fare well in prison. So it would be a massive issue. And, we'd be remiss not to mention that. I genuinely believe these militant trans activists, which, by the way, are nearly all men, are probably the most misogynist group of activists we've ever seen. And the irony seems to be lost.
We could talk about that misogyny thing, because I sort of have some different views on it, but there are these extraordinary signs. I mean, as you say, one of them was bring back witch burning with a JK written on it, meaning rolling. One of them was I heart pissing on turfs. That's a real sign. The only good turf is like a hangman picture turf, as you say. You're just jealous that my dick's bigger than your boyfriend's and my tits are bigger than yours. And yours has an apostrophe in it. Fascinating. Famously don't need an apostrophe in yours. It's the
least worrying part of that sentence for me, but okay.
Or something is belonging to your. which already kind of, if I say yours, it's already belonging to you. Don't need the obsessive apostrophe anyway. We all know this. That's my main problem there. Yeah, it's shocking stuff, isn't it? I mean, what are they up to? And J.K. Rowling has been unbelievable on this, and she had that picture of her with the cigar and all that stuff. Now, I have an uneasy alliance with the TERFs as a misogynist myself. I don't really, they're feminists. We don't agree. They're lefties. What I want, though, they're so effective. What I just want is, I don't know if I said this before, Paul may have said it on the telly, probably. I'm that stupid, but is J.K. Rowling to start getting public transport. A migrant stares down at her in an uncomfortable way. She realizes, the next challenge, which people like Jess Gill have realized, the next frontier is migrants sexually harassing women. But it's a harder cause to talk about because it sounds right wing, whereas these feminists are often lefties. But if the problem is Rowling, she's in her bloody cabs, she's in her dark vehicles with tinted windows, she's on her yacht. She's not out there getting harassed by migrants, is she? But the second that she is, she will end immigration. Am I right?
Yeah, we talked about this on GB News Headliners on Saturday night just gone. Great show, great feedback, great times. Might not happen again.
Because we were finally allowed Dixon Cox.
Oh, man, Curse. Dixon Cox and Curse.
Yeah.
It was
Dixon
phenomenal.
Cox and Curse.
Phenomenal stuff. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I know everybody else did as well. So that was lovely. But we said what did we say on that? We said on there, we were starting a campaign to get J.K. Rowling on the tube, because if she could travel on public transport in London, she might be more interested in some of the other things we'd like her to be active about.
For 5 minutes, she'd be against migrants, and she'd also run a campaign against leaving chicken bones in the end carriage. I'd love to see that campaign.
Always the end carriage. It's like it's like David Attenborough. He went for a tube, he'd pick them up, and we can tell who's been here because
yeah, there's just so much litter in the end carriage. It's disgusting, man. It is disgusting.
It is the end tube. I don't know what it is. That used to be on a commute. This is really off topic now, but I used to do a lot of commuting into London from a place called Petersfield in Hampshire. And famously, before my time of commuting, actually, the rear carriage was always for smoking. When it wasn't for smoking anymore, it was basically for bants. That the coolest people on the train got in the back carriage and would sit there and chat, and it would just be fun times. It's not the same on the tube, shall we say?
No.
No one's going to the rear carriage for bants on the tube. But
I go to get away from people, but it is also, you do get the very dregs of people. You get fewer people, but the ones you get are not in good shape. Anyway, go on, Paul.
Lots of good public transport in London, though. I would hasten to add, just dangerous. But the J.K. Rowling is I can't stop saying Rowling. I've always said Rowling. I know it's rolling like bowling. People keep telling me that, like producers at GB News say that to me. But what can I say? I grew up on a council estate, guys. You're lucky I know words. But it's
a microaggression.
The thing about J.K. Rowling is that yes, there are all these things. Okay, there are plenty of things that we can talk about, and isn't it fascinating that the Venn diagram of feminists and based men now has overlapped? But irrespective of what we might think of someone like her other politics, for instance, this cause would not have been as successful as it has been without people of her stature, because she's too rich to be cancelled. And it takes that now. It took that throughout that period. Maybe less so now, but there was definitely a period where multimillionaires that would be afraid to lose their jobs because their life cost them multi-millions of pounds to live every year, wouldn't have said anything because they didn't want to lose work. J.K., you had to literally be a billionaire or have hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds to be able to speak up and not worry. And it hasn't affected her. She's been shunned by the people that she's made successful, and history will look very poorly upon those people. So ultimately, irrespective of anything else you might think of characters like J.K. Rowling, the cause would not have been as successful without her. And for that, I'm incredibly grateful. And I have actually got in trouble for saying that she's a heroine. And we'll remember this one.
I thought you were going to say heroin addict then. I was like, I know she lives in Scotland.
I would get in trouble for that.
I was like, that's why you'd get in trouble. It's just what I thought you were going to say.
I mean,
she's in Edinburgh. She's a heroin addict. She's not. Let's be very clear.
She's not. No, she doesn't need to be. She doesn't need to be.
But you know what? You're right. I mean, it shows what a struggle it is. You have to write an incredibly best-selling multi-part series about a child wizard to actually be able to say that women are real. I mean, that's a high bar, Paul. I mean, how many? Unless you're Tolkien or C.S. Lewis or something, you can't say basic facts. You have to write multi-part fantasy, incredibly successful fantasy series.
And what is even more amazing is a story about an ordinary boy that is actually one of the greatest wizards of all time is far more believable than most of the trans activists' debate.
That's a good point. Good point, Paul.
The philosopher's cock. Sorry.
That's the episode title sorted. So, what about this, though, in the Mail on Sunday? Ministers in WhatsApp plot to defy trans rulings. So Labour ministers are secretly plotting to defy the landmark court rulings. So this is the problem. You see, okay, it's one ruling, but we still have nutters in every part of our system. The judiciary, the politicians themselves. So they're just going to not do it, potentially.
Yeah, lots of people have said this isn't over. Lots of sensible people, by the way. This isn't skepticism and always looking on the dark side of life. This is educated people that are very experienced, knowing that victories like this can be very hollow if you don't concentrate. Because the reason you need to concentrate is the reason that this became such an issue in the first place is because powerful people, and in this case politicians who are powerful, have all got together and said, we don't like this. They all happen to largely be in one party. It's not entirely true. There are the occasional Conservatives, but largely it's the Labour Party because they're in power. Nearly all Greens believe this stuff as well. The Venn diagram of environmentalism and trans activism is something that surprises us all, I think, because I don't think the two are linked. And then, of course, part of that Venn diagram now is Palestine, for instance. Yeah. It basically they pick up any left wing cause. So if you could make eating dog shit a left wing cause and they'd support it, essentially. But what we've ended up here is some people that just have bet their careers and they bet their life and they bet their livelihood on this activism. They're not going to back down. They are nothing without it. They are absolutely nothing without it. It's to their very core the one thing that they're willing to die for, and because of that, we've potentially got a situation where, up until today, and today of recording is Tuesday, the 22nd of April. Before today, Keir Starmer hadn't said anything. So not only was his silence deafening, and because we firmly believe it's because he doesn't believe in this ruling, but he has to because he masturbates over the law. But until Keir Starmer said anything, the danger was that Keir Starmer would back these backbenchers as well. So surreptitiously or in the background would support them in some way and enable them to usurp the Supreme Court. I would say that as much as I don't trust him, that after his comments today, I don't think that would be the case.
All right. Let's see what happens. I mean, maybe we've covered that story enough. I mean, let's see if people actually enact this law. I think it's not completely one, but it's sort of semi one, isn't it? The trans war. Lots of people have put a lot into it. One thing that isn't one though is the immigration problem and the problem of decline of native population. So let's move on to look at Renaud Camus. And I wanted to do this story. It was meant to be on Free Speech Nation on Sunday. It wasn't. It was spiked. So I came in sort of for nothing because I really wanted to talk about this story. Let me just get some of the facts right. So Renaud Camus, French philosopher, political writer, whatever you call him, incredibly prolific writer, coined the Great Replacement term, and that has been taken on by various people and has a bad reputation now as some sort of internet conspiracy. But it's not that. It's an essay, and it's a position on the decline of the native populations of Europe and Camus' regret and great sorrow at seeing that. And, it's not even a conspiracy. So there's a quote from him, from one of his essays, where discussing whether it's a conspiracy, he says, "Alas, no. What I believe is that there are obscure movements in the depths of the species, subject to the very laws of tragedy, starting with the first of them, which has it that the wishes of men and civilizations whose disappearance is foreordained shall be granted." So he's talking about a kind of fatalism, a kind of destiny that just some peoples maybe are not going to make it. So not a conspiracy, more like just a sort of maybe this is how it is. but he's upset about it. And he's a conservative person in all regards. So he sees this and thinks, I don't like this change, as many of us don't. And he was banned from entering the country. He was supposed to be speaking at an event run by the Homeland Party. I suppose that adds some controversy to it as well. Um, he didn't get in because he was deemed not conducive to the public good, which is kind of extraordinary when you talk about the people that have got in. We can go into some examples later, but the amount of nutters and killers and Islamic extremists and mentalists we've let in is extraordinary, and we don't let in a dapper French philosopher. So that's absurd. I mean, and of course, if we can just stop people coming in because they're not conducive to the public good, why are we letting in endless migrants, which ironically is causing part of the problem he's talking about? Can't we just stand at the on the beaches with a megaphone saying not conducive to the public good? Just wave a piece of paper in front of the dinghies and push them back into the water. I mean, it's not. Why are they conducive to the public good? We don't even know who they are. Completely insane and absurd. And it's the anti-intellectualism of the total state, of the progressive elite. It just sees things as threat or not threat, enemy, friend. So Roger Scruton had similar treatment. He was seen as an enemy. Camus, enemy. Geert Wilders wasn't allowed in the country. Very popular Dutch politician. And yet you see the kind of people who are, which are people who literally hate us and want to destroy us. I'll get some examples later from a thread on Twitter. But that's the overview of it. And by the way, he's a Zionist. He's a gay guy. He's a, the idea he's anti-Semitic is actually a self-professed Zionist. Whether you like it or not, that is what he is. So this was an absolutely shocking story to me. What did you think, Paul?
The reason it's a shocking story is that it's a perfectly law-abiding citizen from France trying to come to the UK, invited by the Homeland Party, which is the only piece of controversy about this, really. Most of our listeners understand who the Homeland Party is, and they certainly wouldn't be a political party favoured by our current government, for instance. And lots of people on the right find the Homeland Party far too to the right. However, that doesn't mean that somebody can't come into the country. So when you look at this, you think, well, the only reason he wasn't allowed in is because he took the legal route. And if you want to get into this country, no matter who you are, the illegal route's the best way. But that, under a little bit of inspection, is not true either, because of course there are people coming here illegally on dinghies, and we're all up in arms about that, and it's absolutely outrageous. And we can go into and have gone into great detail about that in the past. But there are also people that are allowed into this country, that have gone into this country via legal means, that we really, really don't want to be here, largely from the Islamist faction of the Muslim faith. So the fact that somebody just who has a right-wing perspective of the world is seen as undesirable tells us all we need to know about the political landscape as we speak at the moment. We are not in 1945, or we're not in the 1930s or 1920s, okay? His view is actually a minority view, which is shared by a quite quiet majority. So there are people that would be interested in listening to what he had to say, me included in that. And I'm not as far to the right as our listener and viewers have pointed out a number of times as he is. But I'd be very interested to hear what he has to say. And the minute someone tells me that I cannot hear that view, I'm immediately suspicious, and as should everybody else be as well. Because if you support free speech in any way, then let all the views be heard, and have critical thinking, and use the intelligence of your experience to make your own mind up. Don't be told what to think and say by someone like Keir Starmer, Nick. That's what I'd have to say about this.
Well, yeah, and to me, it's not controversial that European populations are dwindling native populations. That's just clear
fact
from the data. Yeah, the only controversial part is how deliberate it is, and he has talked about it as like a crime from the government. So it's a little bit ambiguous, because in his writings it sounds like it's not. He's not saying it's deliberate. I need to read more. I picked up some of his essays. I knew about him. I'd read Simon Evans's excellent essay on him, but I hadn't actually really gone and done the homework. So I'm doing it now. I've bought the books to. It's a great recommendation from Rebecca Cooper and Keir Starmer. If they say you can't come in the country, I'm like, oh, it sounds like someone I probably want to buy their book. Yeah. So I've picked up Enemy of the Disaster and another one, and so I'm reading them now. But yeah, when he talks about it so Matt Goodwin, to his credit, had him on GB News, which must have been quite a behind the scenes thing to get him on, I think. But he got him on, and he said it's a crime that our governments are doing this. So you could say there's an element of implying it's deliberate there, but elsewhere he says it isn't. So, but he may not mean deliberate. He just may just mean, why are they allowing this? He sort of talks about it as just an extraordinary sort of atrocity that we're allowing to happen, a sort of a historical landmark, up there with a kind of a plague or a kind of a. These are not his words. I'm sort of paraphrasing it. I think it was Andrew Sullivan, even, who's a bit of a lib, that said, that compared it to that. He talked about the massive decline in London's white British demographic and said you'd only get this kind of thing with a sort of massive event like a plague or something. This is a massive, at very least, it's a massive historical event that's being talked about as if it's nothing. It's like, oh yeah, it's 33% white British in London, in the capital of England now. Yeah, that's normal,
So
and it's not normal. It's very, at very least, being dispassionate. It's a massive change.
we've got a French chap, who for 20 years has been purporting that there is potentially a replacement going on, the Great Replacement Theory, and it's very.
It's not a theory, but he always says it's not a theory. It's just a fact. But go on.
Yeah. So, just for the purposes of the debate, I'm sort of just going to sketch out the core aspects of this, and that includes an incumbent culture being overtaken by a foreign culture, and the incumbent government of that culture allowing it to happen for their own benefit. Okay, so 20 years ago, that would have seen as potentially preposterous to maybe 80% of the population. Fast forward to now, and that doesn't seem preposterous to about 80% of the population. So, if you are going to accept that something is going on, but you are going to shoot down the people that say it's been going on for some time, and you're not going to allow them to be heard, it's going to make critical thinking people, intelligent people who want to understand the truth and want to be furnished with as much data as possible, very, very suspicious. So, you should let people talk. It's as simple as that. You just think of, even in modern history, and oh my God, I'm going to invoke the Nazis, okay? I really, really try not to at any point whatsoever. But one of the reasons that was allowed to perpetuate is because people didn't challenge it. And they just went along with it to some degree, okay? So it could possibly have been prevented. And we'll leave that up to the debate of our viewers and listeners. That's not the point of my point. My point is, there is a very educated chap, that has made a point which he believes is fact. I've described it as a theory, and that on the face of it, without knowing too much, and I've read Simon's essay as well, but outside of that, I was completely unaware of this guy, as we discussed off air. On the face of it, he seems to be pointing out something that definitely appears to be happening, and not just in London, major cities and smaller towns throughout the UK and across Europe in general. So surely we should be listening to find out what he has to say, because many people, and we'll get to reform later, but many people are concerned about this, and because they're concerned, we are seeing the rise of the populist right. Now, that's a good thing, in my opinion, because we need to squash the populist activist left, because it's run amok for what is now getting on for 40 years. And look at where we are. So I think we do need to listen to people. And when we're told we can't listen to people, you're absolutely right, Nick. That's exactly the point you start listening.
Well, because if this government or any government really wanted to tamp down these theories or rumors or speculations, they would come out and say something. But what they do, I tried to make this point in the TV, we have a declining birth rate, something like 1.44 now in Britain, needs to be about 2.5 or more. So combined with the Boris wave of net immigration of around 1 million, combined with these demographic stats, we see white British people in London at 33%, whatever it is, 35, 33. And you go, okay. And then coupled with that, you have woke DEI and all that stuff. So you have the police, South Yorkshire, West Yorkshire police saying white Europeans are in the bronze category for recruitment. They will be well down the list of recruitment. NHS openly discriminating against British people for the recruitment. And as Alison Pearson has revealed, in many cases, bringing in Indian people who have just paid for a degree. It's just nepotism. It's not even better candidates, or it's not even comparable candidates. It's just pure nepotism. And British people are getting rejected when we need them in the NHS. RAF, useless white males. And you can go on and on. So my point is, it's the exact perfect cocktail for making people suspicious. We've got low birth rates. We've got massive amounts of sudden immigration, the Boris wave, and we've got a general anti-white animus throughout our major institutions: the police, the NHS, the civil service. You can go on and on. The military. So, of course, as a white British person, you go, hang on. Oh, and by the way, you're going to jail over Southport for noticing. And by the way, Renaud Camus not allowed in the country for noticing. So the real crime is noticing. So that's the worst possible way to approach it. I don't know why they're doing it. Why are they? Maybe Boris was just an idiot. He thought we needed people after COVID, which is what he claims. Maybe, and the birth rates are down throughout many countries, not just the West, but Japan, Korea, Singapore. So you go, okay, birth rates are generally low. Maybe the so-called replacement migration is just a kind of cock up, and maybe they just hate white people throughout all our institutions because they bought into wokeness, and it's a trendy fad. And you go, okay, but you put these things together, you've got a declining population who is hated, who are made second-class citizens in the law. And if the sentencing guidelines had passed, they really would officially have been, and it just didn't quite pass. But we basically are second-class citizens. We all know about the two-tier policing. So we're second-class citizens in our own country. We're dwindling in numbers. Meanwhile, you're bringing in loads of other people. Meanwhile, don't bring in the French philosopher that points it out. So together, you're going to go, WTF? What is going on?
Exactly. And the danger is, and there are people that I respect, not necessarily agree with all the time, that say his views, and I don't know because I don't have enough detail, are abhorrent. So if that is the prevailing message from certainly, obviously, mainstream media, but even from the centre right media sometimes, and people just accept it carte blanche, then we're never going to learn anything. I think we should understand as much as we possibly can about everything. That's why I thoroughly enjoy doing this job. It's why I thoroughly enjoy the freedom of our podcast, Nick. And it's why I urge absolutely everybody, when they challenge me on things, is, I like to listen to them, and I encourage them to go away and perhaps research some of the things that I'm talking about. It doesn't mean I think because they'll do that, they'll immediately come to my point of view. But what it means is we all become collectively more intelligent and better informed. And that's exactly what's going on here. You cannot squash information just because you're worried about it. Now, here's the fact, right? Okay. Someone like the BBC will tell you what's right and what's wrong, and we're expected to believe them. So why can't somebody else tell us what's right and what's wrong? Now, the overarching point I'm trying to make here, in a rather convoluted and waffly way, as I often do, is that if it doesn't stand up to scrutiny, it will disappear. It will go away. Fact and truth will win the day. But let's hear it. And if it does stand up to scrutiny, and there is a huge element of truth about something like that, then boy, do we need to listen, and boy, do we need to start to learn.
Yeah, well, this is a free speech podcast, but now we're seeing podcasts even turn against free speech over issues like Israel, which is a new trend, but it's a whole other hour in itself. But I just want to share something from this Sam Bidwell thread. A very smart guy, Sam. I met him a while ago at an Unheard conference when he had a mere 2,000 followers. Now he's smashing it. He's got 27,000. He does these brilliant threads on Twitter. And he talks about the Home Office has barred Renaud Camus. The claim is his presence is not conducive to the public good, but is at a consistent standard. And then he looks at some other people we've allowed. And I'm not going to try and pronounce all the names, but here's a guy who celebrated the murder of politicians in Pakistan, arguing that it's legitimate to kill people who oppose Pakistan's blasphemy laws. This is Saeed Musaf. No, I'm not going to try. Anyway, he came in because there's too many complicated names for you. I'm sorry, I'm English. And he was allowed in 2016 into the UK, and he was preaching in UK mosques. Here's another one. Let me just pick some of my favorites. Mohammed Ibn Munir is an American cleric, and he's openly voiced his support for jihad and has argued that Jews deserve Allah's divine wrath. He's also justified stoning for adultery, so he's not all bad. He carried out a UK speaking tour in February 2025. I'm so sorry. Visiting Birmingham, Leeds, and London. How about that? There's one. I'll do one more. There's this guy in Wales, So here's a speaker who described Hamas's resistance fighters denied official reports of a massacre of Israeli citizens on October 7th, 2023. In July 2023, he hosted a 21-part series of lectures at the South Wales Islamic Centre. You get the idea. You don't have to be, I don't think, particularly pro-Israel to go, okay, we're letting in a lot of people who are properly the pro-violence against the West, etc., and yet we can't let in a French philosopher. So, and why? Because it's the people, the friends of the regime and the enemies of the regime. Those people are in a sick way friends of the regime because they're the other and they're the ones that critique the West, even if they critique it very violently or by advocating violence. They're critiquing the West. They're not evil white Westerners. So they're on the side of the regime in a strange way. Whereas the French philosopher who's defending the West is against. That's a suicidal regime. You can't maintain a country or a Western world like that.
Demonstrably so as well. It's not like that's an outrageous statement to make. We could list evidence as long as your arm, Nick, and you've got a long arm. People aren't aware of this, but your arms are long. Great hugger, Nick Dixon.
They're not actually that long. I struggle with suits being a bit long in the arm.
Creating a new disability just for the purposes of this ridiculous joke. Look, this is it. But what we do know is that the people we're arguing against here have protected characteristics. Okay, we are very scared of a few things in this country, and one of them is protecting the characteristics of minorities, whoever those minorities will be. So if we take the natural route of things, the only way we're ever going to be able to tackle this is if we allow a group of minorities to become the majority. Then it'll be acceptable to challenge them in some way, and by which point it would be too late because it's incredibly powerful as a minority as it is. So we talk about human rights a lot, and some human rights are more equal than others, to paraphrase Animal Farm. They are, and demonstrably so, and it's very unfortunate. If Renaud Camus had protected characteristics in the same way as an Islamist preacher does, this wouldn't be an issue, would it? That he would be able to come over, he'd be able to go and speak at the Homeland Party conference or whatever it is he was going to, the meeting, the gathering, whatever it was, and he'd be able to go away again. And some people that are already convinced, by the way, that he's going to preach to the choir, by the way. There's no one at the Homeland Party, unless they sneaked in because they're a member of Hope Not Hate. And I don't know how a member of Hope Not Hate would be able to sneak into a meeting like that. That would be hilarious. They'd have to cover the green hair and all the middle-class white privilege for a start. But he doesn't have those protective characteristics. So we are seeing straight away there's two tiers all over the place, wherever you look at this. And of course, if you point that out, you are immediately far right thuggery. That's so straight away that the disinformation around anybody who thinks differently is that they are far right. And up until this point in history, from about the middle of the 20th century, just before, being far right means that you are naturally bad. So it's like racism, okay? If we can dilute, and it'd be a real shame if we did, but if we could dilute the word racism and somebody being called racist, so many doors would open, so many debates would take place, and so many truths would be unearthed. It'd be unreal. Of course, it's such an emotive, triggering thing to be called racist, or actually be racist in some way, that we can't have the debate. So you just squash these people down and you chuck the argument away, and it stands. I think we're just starting to see the beginning of the end of some of this stuff, but there is a long way to go.
Yeah, and ironically, Camus has an essay about this called The Second Career of Adolf Hitler, about the massive impact of, meaning that you can't ever have a sensible discussion because Hitler once existed. Very similar to Nima Parvini's point about the boomer truth regime. We exist in this post-World War II hysterical paradigm where you can't even have a discussion because of Hitler once existed. And by the way, what could be a smaller minority than a dapper French gay Zionist conservative philosopher?
The wrong type of minority.
That's literally one of them. I know. You never allowed the minority of one. We already solved. People have said we already solved this with the individual. That is the smallest minority. We did all this. We solved it, and no one cares about the individual anymore, Paul.
But no,
Who
because
will think of the
individualism is
individual?
considered a conservative idea,
Yeah.
a conservative philosophy. It's the one thing the left are totally against. They love minorities, but minorities in a group. You can't have a minority of one, like you've already pointed out, and you can't have individualism, because individualism means individual thinking, and individual thinking could lead us astray. It only takes one Renaud Camus to rock the apple cart, and all of a sudden the apples are all over the road, and that's a big problem for some people.
Which ironically sounds like a quaint French village. But yeah, I mean, there is a sort of irony as well, though, of course, not irony, but it's not individualism, it's collectivism. But he's talking about the collectivism you're not allowed to mention, which is of native European people, even though they are, of course, famously the global minority. And they're now down to something
6%.
like, I thought it was 7%.
6%.
But yeah, okay. Maybe it's gone down since I last checked. I thought 7%. Yeah, but it's down from 30 it used to be. I know, it's incredible, isn't it? It's like minority, yeah, check. Indigenous people that are dwindling in the check. Rights, no. Hated and no rights. Oh, it's interesting.
Because of success.
Because they hate us because they ain't us, Paul. Is that what you're saying?
It is. If there's one thing that socialism and communism hates, it's success. Success that they are not trying to generate. So individually generated success. You and I start an enterprise using capitalism and make ourselves a success. That is not on as far as those doctrines are concerned. And if you allow hundreds, if not millions of people to do that, then you have a problem, because you can't control those people. They become individually wealthy, and they can be like J.K. Rowling, and they can become a voice for the people that is outside of their control. And before you know it, they're clamping down on it. And it's exactly what we've got. And the reason it's enabled in the West is because we've progressed so far we believe we've progressed so far, particularly in terms of intelligentsia, where great groups of people now are educated in a way they weren't before. But what they don't recognize is they're educated in a specific way, and it makes them naive to other things. They've been taught that this is the truth, and they've learned a lot about it. And then if anything was to challenge that in any way, they check against the manual. The manual says that's far right or racist, and they come back to their original position and say, no, I'm not listening. Okay, so we see this play out at varying levels in different ways across the whole demographic of these debates that are going on within the culture war. But essentially it comes back, we just hit on this right now. It comes back to individualism. It comes back to people thinking for themselves. It comes back to people acting on their own thoughts from an individual perspective. And then, God forbid, encouraging other people with debate. So, these people could be wrong. Some people could be wrong. Some people could be right. But if you allow free speech, particularly if you allow absolutism for free speech, then there are people, the type of people that Keir Starmer would see as heroes, that won't like it. The WEF, the Illuminati, I hasten skeptically to add. But this is what happens. They talk about collectivism in ways they dislike, but they've got their own forms of collectivism which we all have to abide by. And if you don't, then you're bad. Look no further than the BBC.
All right. Well, that is Renaud Camus. Maybe we'll do another story on YouTube for you. Which let's move to this Reform poll then. So there's no real link there, but Reform would now beat Labour to be largest party, poll shows. This was in the Telegraph. So it's interesting because I criticise Reform, I praise them when they deserve it, but whatever the critiques of them are, I don't think it's really damaging them at the moment with pollsters. So this was more in common, and it found that Farage's party would take more than 150 seats from Labour and win 180 seats. Labour and the Conservatives would be tied on 165 each. So it's interesting. They are smashing it in the polls. There's no doubt. And I've seen people talking about this even on Times Radio. They're admitting, they're going, yeah, I mean, they are looking very good. So it's fascinating to me, partly because the party is a bit of a mess. So it just shows the desire for that change, even if you think they represent that change, which I'm very skeptical of. But people are so desperate for something. The Union Party is so cooked that it's like, okay, anything would be better, and people like Farage, but at the same time, Paul, there's all these. So Rupert Lowe criticised Farage's take on Islam from that Winston Marshall interview, and he did a long post on that I thought was very good. Obviously, some people violently disagreed with me. Many people agreed. They also had this quite funny thing where they're now taking candidates from the BNP in reform, but don't worry, it's the Bangladesh Nationalist Party.
That was your tweet, wasn't it?
I know. It's so funny to me.
It did make me laugh.
This was a guy, I think he was Ilford South, and he was one of their candidates. And it's extraordinary. His background is Bangladesh Nationalist Party, and people were finding that quite funny. The other one was a different guy called Watson, and he had said that he personally supports economic reparations for the unimaginable wrong of slavery. So I put out this satirical tweet that idiots didn't get. There 1.1 thousand people did get it. I said, I look forward to all the reform accounts telling me I need to shut up and accept reparations for slavery as the new flagship policy. And very low IQ people thought I literally meant that, but clearly it was a satire on the fact that reform has constant new whims that come from Farage, and we're supposed to get behind them immediately, or Lee Hurst will block you, as he has me, and loads of reform accounts will jump on you, say, you need to be backing Farage. Why don't you? This is our only chance. Just back Farage. It's like, no, I'll tell you what, why don't I just say what I want? How about that? I mean, I voted reform, and I want reform to be better for the next election. I want them to offer something we can vote for. But if they don't, then you can't vote for them. That just should be the case with any party. We need someone to save Britain and England and the West, ideally. And it doesn't matter who it is. But when Farage says things like, oh, we've lost if we alienate Islam, we're going to lose Islam 6.5% of the population. But Farage is already saying we'll lose, when he says he doesn't care about the decline in English people and all this kind of thing. It goes so far when he says we can't do mass deportations. You never know what he's going to say one day to the next. We need a party that, when it gets to the point where I've said this before, but when they're just offering you nothing, all the things you want, it's like, no, reform offering none of those. But you have to vote for them anyway, or you're just a traitor, a scum. It's like, what? So I'm just going to keep speaking my mind as a commentator, and people are free to be militant about reform, and I can do what I do. But what do you think, Paul?
Oh, there's lots to talk about there. First of all, the success of reform, congratulations to them, by the way, is not by accident, but it's not just all of their own making. A lot of these voters are in what we would now call the deindustrialized heartlands of the UK, and they've become disenfranchised. So by deindustrialized, I mean the working towns of the UK that would traditionally have voted Labour, that went to Tories in 2019 because they wanted to get Brexit done, and went back to Labour because the Tories failed them completely, and now Labour are failing them again. So it's twofold here. It's the success and the rise of Nigel Farage as someone, as they see, who champions the things that they believe in the most, and the utter failure of the two other parties that they've put their faith in the past. And I would say the most disappointing thing there for those voters is the Labour Party. Not because I'm anti-Labour Party now, it's because the Labour Party was born and created on the back of supporting these industrialised heartlands, the unions, the working man, etc., etc. Totally unconnected now. Totally unconnected. Keir Starmer is the furthest thing from a working man that has ever been in the Labour Party. I used to say that was Jeremy Corbyn. But it's not. Keir Starmer is far worse for the Labour Party.
But his dad was a toolmaker, Paul.
Well, yeah, that's about as close as he gets to it. It's about as close as he gets to it. I don't know what his dad, God rest his soul, thinks of him, but if he was a union man, he can't think too much of Keir Starmer, I'm sure.
The unions still control them, don't they? Famously with this bin
thing.
They do. The Unite Union, it's annoying because they've abandoned the working class, you say, except that the unions still control them.
Well, many unions, you automatically have to join, well, you did automatically have to join the Labour Party if you joined the unions, which is why the Labour Party has such a high member rate. I know that Reform has surpassed the Conservatives now, but they've still some way, probably another 100,000 or more before they get to the Labour Party, because it's connected directly to all the unions. And, I think they will surpass at some point, but it'll be a hell of an effort. And what it will take is some of those people that are members of the Labour Party within the unions to jump over to Reform. That looks like what could happen. Of course, 180 versus two parties on 165. Basically, really, all that means is those two parties of 165 come together and they can be government. Of course, that takes out any of the emotion of it because those two parties are diametrically opposed to one another. In theory, the Conservatives and the Labour Party, you and I would argue they're exactly the same, just different colours shit. Sorry to swear, I don't know, just stuff out impassioned at that point. But the Reform are doing incredibly well. The reason I wanted to paint that picture is because there might be some people out there that just happened across our podcast who are thinking, I still don't understand why Reform are doing well. Well, that's one of the reasons that they're doing well, because other people are doing so badly. But of course, one of the other points you made about sort of one day understanding Reform policy and the next day having absolutely no idea. What is clear is there is a strategy that's been formulated. My guess is that it's been formulated between Nigel Farage and Zia Youssef. I don't see anybody else within that party that would have formulated that. And what that's meant is they have stuck by that gospel, and it's meant chucking out people like Rupert Lowe, because Rupert Lowe wasn't entirely on board. And the reason Rupert Lowe is not on board is the same reason people like yourself, Nick, and I'm just going to use you as an example here. There are many, many people stood behind you on this that saw Rupert Lowe as actually the messiah within the Reform Party, because he was the one who stood up in Parliament or stood in front of a camera or wrote on Twitter, now known as X, the type of things that people have been wanting to hear for a decade or more. And he was the only person saying those things. Refer to the rape gangs, for instance. Go back and watch everything Rupert had to say about that, and you will understand where you and many other people are coming from. However, he doesn't fall in line with what's become the central policy, which none of us understand what the central policy for Reform is now, but it feels to me like it's walking its way towards the centre ground, Nick, in order to win as many votes as possible. And that appears to include trying to win the Muslim vote. So I don't think the Muslim vote and the Reform Party make good bedfellows for many, many reasons, but culturally, amongst other things. Now, I'm not suggesting, and I don't think I hear many people on the right suggest this either. Some people do, of course, but you can still be Muslim and be a supporter of British culture, and we've seen it over and over. Zia Youssef, obviously. Some would argue, obviously not, but let's just, for the point of my debate, say obviously so. Does, and seems to be fitting in. Some people would argue not, because of the very point I'm making, which is that Nigel Farage now is diluting his output in order to win as many votes as possible. However, it's working. And this is where it's working because the polls show it's working. The war's not won. I'm not even sure the battle's won, but it's working because the polls are suggesting it is. There's a long way to go. But will that be enough? Will it be too much of a compromise, Nick?
Yes, and also the point people make to me a lot is, no, Farage is just doing this now, and he's going to get in and do all these base things. I'm like, you have zero evidence for that. All the evidence really with Farage is he's this charismatic campaigner who lacks a bit of substance on the policy side, and he's inexperienced. Obviously, they've not allowed him into the system. That's their stupidity. Yes, he's met Dominic Cummings once, but you get in there. Cummings himself was overwhelmed by the system. Farage goes in there already with a fairly wet promise of, we can't do mass deportations, we can't do this and that. Already very soft. And then you're telling me, but he's just going to crack the whip day one, do all this stuff that I was talking to Douglas Carswell about on the podcast, just, orders in council maybe, or whatever it takes to get to overwhelm the blob and get all your policies through. Seems incredibly unlikely to me. One, they'd even have the will to do it, because I don't think he believes in a lot of these policies. I think he has a sort of more or less boomer take. I get told off for saying boomer, more or less kind of boomer, small business, Thatcherite sort of take, which is okay for that, for the economics. But I'm not sure he believes in a lot of the cultural side. And even if he did, it'd be incredibly hard to get it through. And I see no evidence that he'd have the will, the desire, the ability to get that through. I mean, maybe he'd hit the ground running. Maybe he's speaking to Dominic Cummings, which is good. Maybe he'd get a team of people. How do we actually affect these changes? I think it'd be. It looks so much to me like it would just be more of the same with a slightly different hue of. There's a British flag, and there's a few words about Spitfires or something. It honestly feels like that to me at this point, because you get, like you say, the demonizing of Rupert Lowe, the guy who was actually saying the tough things that we need, was asking the questions in Parliament, and then he's got dementia, they claim, and this obvious witch hunt against him. To me, that's indicative of where they are. I mean, but the people in my Twitter replies, or some of them, are asking me to go against all evidence, the treatment of Rupert Lowe, the things Farage has repeatedly said, the fact that it's so hard to get things done in Parliament, or in our system, even if you believe in them. They're just asking me to just believe that reform is the only answer. It's absurd. I mean, if they say some good things, I'll back them. And also, people talk to me like I'm some sort of traitor. I voted for them, so it's like, oh, you're anti-reform. That's weird because I just voted for them very recently. So it's like, but I'm anti them, and I've promoted them loads when they were doing well, and when it was Rupert Lowe, and I've had Richard Tice on the podcast and given a pretty agreeable interview, because I'm kind of agreeable anyway. But I gave Tice a nice interview. Ben Habib, when he was in Reform, we've done a podcast on the current thing. Belinda DeLucy, who's very nice, but had people on Reform, and I say, oh great, people should vote Reform. Yet I'm anti-Reform. No, you're a moron. I'm anti the watering down of Reform's message into oblivion. Sorry for
it
the
just
rant,
goes
Paul.
to prove that the right is not immune from groupthink.
True.
In a way it believes it is. And one thing someone like you does, Nick, is challenge groupthink at each step of the way. And there are still Reform voters out there like yourself that are more than happy to vote Reform, but based on their principles. Their principles being something that they strongly believe in, but are happy to be challenged on. One thing we're always told in British politics is it's nothing like American politics. So we watch what's happened with Donald Trump and get slightly excited and think, could that happen in this country? Could someone like Donald Trump become a leader in this country? We're told it's not possible. We're told that even by Nigel Farage, actually, who you'd think would be a strong believer in that view. But we're told that it's just not possible under our political system. However, I think it's very curious what's happening with Reform, and it's happening irrespective of what the mainstream is saying. So to some degree, within the confines of our political environment, it is happening in a very British way that someone like Nigel Farage is able to emulate the type of thing that Donald Trump is doing, has done, and is doing in the States. So I think the canny within the Reform Party can look at it and go, there's more scope to play with than they believe, or they're allowing us to believe. And of course, there is a game to be played, and I'm no expert of the game. People have said to us both you and I think you're much stronger a candidate for this than I am, that we could both be in politics in some way, because I think that we talk passionately and openly and honestly about our views, and I think that's now seen as something that's good for politics. Which is remarkable, because since Tony Blair, actually the type of politician people have been looking for is the professional safe type, thinking that that Tony Blair was safe. Professional, yes. Safe, I would argue against, because nearly everything that we complain about now was generated as a result of Labour policies during New Labour, a party that I voted for at that time, because I was 18. And it seemed to fit my thinking of the world then. And we should never base anything on what 18-year-old think. Of course we shouldn't. And look at Greta Thunberg. Fucking mess that is. But anyway, I think there is more scope to play with in terms of the art of the possible within politics. I'm somewhere between your view and the view of people who think that things could change should they get into power. The reason I am is because that is true of every political party. Look at Labour. Look at the things. Labour are delivering well outside their manifesto on things. Now, if you're a supporter of Labour and the things they're delivering outside of their manifesto, you're probably feeling quite smug and happy at the moment, which can work in reverse. So, it could work for someone like Reform. Nigel Farage could move himself towards the centre, try and win as many votes as possible, get in and become, the Donald Trump of the UK, for instance, and have his own Doge and start deporting people, irrespective of whether they qualify for it or not. So it's not impossible. But that is a wing and a prayer, and that's a promise that can't be proven unless they get in. And there are many voters out there, like yourself, Nick, that Reform are going to rely on, that they're going to have to prove to those people. If that is their strategy, they're going to have to prove to people that they're likely to do that. Because right now, you're not convinced, are you?
Well, to bring it back to Camus, he had an example in the Spectator piece about him. It comes from one of his essays, I think. It must come from one of his essays. And he talks about Lichtenberg, who I believe was a physicist. Anyway, he says, he talks about the French. He says, it goes, he does not accept that these incomers can be French in any true meaning of the word. If they are just as French as I am, then French does not mean much. He uses the image of Lichtenberg's knife. One changes the haft, then the blade, but it is still the same knife to illustrate what's happening. And that analogy just occurred to me, because if Reform changed the haft and then the blade, are they still Reform? Right?
It's Trigger's broom, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because, but you see what I mean?
I've really just dumbed that down for my supporters. I'm so sorry, Nick. Because at first, you actually gave me the respect in your face that said, "Oh, he's he's talking about Only Fools and Horses."
Trigger. Yeah.
We're back with Paul land now. But
it is,
you know, it's so true. The other thing I was going to mention is you talked about you, and not just you, but people writing ironic tweets, basically saying the opposite thing of what you mean in order to make your point, because it makes the point for you on a platform like X. My favourite thing to do when people get that wrong is like it, because in the end, the confusion is so much to them that they end up coming back. They end up getting it. They're like, why is he like, oh, okay, perhaps it's a joke. And one thing, I don't know if you do this, probably not, you haven't got the time, but there's no point arguing with those people. There's no point arguing with those people whatsoever, because otherwise you might as well write your tweet and then write a disclaimer for stupid people at the bottom.
I sometimes end up doing that. I know. I sometimes just call them a moron, then block them. My only rule is there's lots of people cleverer than me out there. There's tons of them. Andrew Doyle, Simon Evans, Nima Parvini, Eric Kaufman. I could go on all day, Paul. But if you are going to correct, quote, one of my tweets, just make sure you're one of those people that's smarter than me. That's all I ask. Because if you're not, you might just be missing the point, and then you might look like an idiot. And I wouldn't want that for you. You know what I mean? There might be layers of irony and humor in my tweet that have not even occurred to you. It's just something that really bothers me. People correcting my tweet. I just see red. I'm just like, yeah, because they do it so arrogantly. If they just don't get it, but they do it, one of them call me an embarrassment, or they call you a prick, or whatever. And it's like, you haven't got it, and now you're attacking me because you're so stupid. Anyway, it's one of my little bugbears. Not saying I'm a nice guy, but yes, it triggers broom, Paul.
Actually,
if you take away everything with Reform, I'm just like, give me something. I've said it before. It's like, no, you still have to vote for them. Okay, so they don't follow my immigration policy or any of my other, but I still have to vote for them despite them following none of my policies.
Yeah, but then you might as well vote for the Green Party, because you don't agree with any of their policies either. And I think that's my point. You still have to win people over, and you can't just say, oh, well, we won you over in 2024, so you're with us, right? But that's not how this works, because what many people are worried about, me included, is that we just get tricked into voting for another arm of the uni party. And that's no good for us whatsoever. That's no good at all. What is demonstrably true is that the progressive left have failed. The progressive left on the right has failed. The progressive left in the centre ground has failed. And the progressive left on the progressive left has really failed. And we're seeing the end of that empire now. We really are. So there is a chance for a phoenix to come from those flames. And at the moment, it looks like Nigel Farage and the Reform Party. But if they hark back or lean into the things that made those failing parties successful, the rest of us are going to see straight through it, particularly in the deindustrialised heartlands of the UK, where you can win and lose any election.
All right, that's like an hour or more for YouTube, and the audio people. So thank you very much for watching and listening. Go to nickdixon.net and we'll do some other stuff. We'll talk about this guy branding the grooming gang scandal a false right-wing narrative. We'll talk about the Pope. Maybe we'll talk about King Charles's Easter message, and the BBC promoting communism to 11-year-olds and other stuff. So we'll do that on nickdixon.net. It's very cheap. I think I figured out it's like, if you get the yearly, it's like 14p a day. So go to nickdixon.net, and you've got my interview I just did with Ed Dutton on the late Jonathan Bowden, very controversial, interesting speaker on the right. And I probably should have promoted it more, but that's a fascinating conversation. Ed's just written a biography about him. That's only on nickdixon.net. with loads of other stuff that's going on there. My full interview with Douglas Carswell I just did, and loads of other stuff. And Paul is on at Paul Cox Comedy on all platforms. Anything you want to say, Paul?
No, just thank you very much for my new followers and subscribers on Substack, particularly those that are paying. Just a big shout out to those, not because they're paying, but because they're paying because they're placing a faith in me, which I've yet to pay them back for, and I appreciate it. And they're doing it. And the reason I'm saying thank you is I'm saying thank you to you as well, Nick. The reason they're doing it is they're seeing me here and going, this is a guy I'd like to invest in, even if it's £50 for the year or £5 for the month or whatever it might be. They're saying, I like this guy, and they are being introduced to me via you, Nick. So thank you to them. Thank you to you, mate.
Oh, well, I'm glad you're getting something out of it. And yeah, and so brilliant. Go and find Paul's Substack. Go and find mine. Yeah, we're getting around up to like 5,000 subscribers, doing very well, and obviously a decent percentage of paid subscribers who we highly value. And for those people, see us on nickdixon.net. And for the rest of you, thank you very much. We'll see you next week.